In Naples, Italy, a man walks onto the gym floor, removes his jacket, and hits a pose. The crowd erupts. The biceps are full. The waist is razor thin. The conditioning is extraordinary. That man is 77 years old. His name is Robby Robinson, known in bodybuilding circles as the Black Prince, and as Mr. Lifestyle. Robinson is one of the most significant figures in the history of the sport and one of its least recognized. His career spans decades marked by poverty, racial discrimination, serious injury, institutional bans, and long periods away from competition, followed by a return to the stage that few athletes of any age could match. This is his story. Robby Robinson was born on May 24, 1946 in Damascus, Georgia, a small rural town in the Jim Crow South. He was the youngest of 14 children. His father, a bootlegger, abandoned the family, leaving his illiterate mother to raise 14 children with virtually no resources. The family eventually relocated to Tallahassee, Florida. Robinson later described growing up in a community where poverty was widespread across racial lines. He attended an all-black school. With no access to gym equipment, he salvaged scrap metal from a nearby sawmill and built his own weights. He went on to play football and run track at Florida A&M University, where he began to notice that his physique was responding to training differently than those around him, marked by unusual muscle development, strong symmetry, and a naturally narrow waist. He began competing in amateur bodybuilding, and over the following years entered more than 300 amateur competitions. That level of output reflected a sustained, methodical commitment to the sport that preceded any professional recognition. What came next would significantly alter his standing in the bodybuilding world. In 1975, Robby Robinson moved to California with one goal: to compete at the professional level. The first test came not on stage, but at Gold's Gym in Venice Beach. One of the established lifters there walked him over to a pair of 150-pound dumbbells and told him to bench press them for 10 reps. Robinson had never trained with dumbbells that heavy before. He completed all 10. He later said he didn't fully understand how he managed it, that adrenaline and the need to prove himself had functioned like fuel. He described the feeling as a double shot of steroids and B12 combined. After that set, he had earned his place in the gym. What followed over the next 12 months was a competitive record that few professionals have matched. In 1975 alone, Robinson won the IFBB Mr. America, the IFBB Mr. World, and the IFBB Mr. Universe, all three titles in his first year as a professional. Most competitors spend full careers pursuing results like those. Robinson achieved them within a single year. It was during this period that he became known as the Black Prince, a nickname that reflected the precision of his physique and the composure he brought to the stage, his symmetry, conditioning, and proportion consistently setting him apart from the competition. The years that followed, however, proved considerably more difficult. Few people outside competitive bodybuilding are aware of how close Robby Robinson came to dying before he had fully grasped what was happening inside his own body. It was around the time of the 1975 Mr. World competition. Someone at his gym had introduced him to performance-enhancing substances, common enough in that era and in that world. He took an injection and walked back from Gold's Gym to his Venice Beach apartment. By the time he reached his front door, his body was in crisis. He collapsed. His skin, despite its depth of pigmentation, had turned gray, a sign of severe oxygen deprivation. By his own account, he was likely going into cardiac arrest. A woman who was with him dragged him inside, got him to the bathtub, and ran cold water over him. That intervention likely saved his life. What he didn't yet fully understand was that he had sickle cell anemia, a genetic blood condition that causes red blood cells to deform into a crescent shape, obstructing blood vessels and cutting off circulation to vital organs. In someone without the condition, that injection might have been manageable. In Robinson's case, it triggered a full systemic crisis. He later described the cells as locking onto each other like hooks, blocking blood flow to the heart, kidneys, and liver. 2 weeks after collapsing on his apartment floor, Robinson competed in the Mr. World contest and won. He later described it as madness. The experience permanently altered his relationship with performance-enhancing substances. He walked away from them entirely. In later years, he became one of the more outspoken critics of drug use in the sport, arguing that it was stripping away the artistry and integrity that bodybuilding was built on. For someone who had nearly died from a single injection, that position carried specific weight. Running alongside this was a separate and ongoing struggle, one rooted not in physiology, but in the racial dynamics of the sport itself. By 1977, Robby Robinson had become arguably the most dominant professional bodybuilder in the world. He was winning every competition he entered, and his physique was almost universally considered superior to his competitors. He carried 20-inch arms on a 29-inch waist, proportions that serious bodybuilding enthusiasts still reference today. That year, he entered the Mr. Olympia, the most prestigious title in the sport. He won his weight category, taking the 200-pound-plus division outright. But when the judges awarded the overall title, the one that mattered most, they gave it to Zane, a white competitor. Robinson finished second. To many who watched, the result didn't reflect what they had seen on stage. Robinson said as much publicly. He stated his belief that the Federation wanted a white Mr. Olympia for commercial reasons, and that the decision had nothing to do with physique. In 1978, the pattern repeated. Robinson again won his division. Again, the overall title went to someone else. By this point, others in the black bodybuilding community had begun to speak up as well. There were reports that the lighting at certain competitions was set up in ways that were unfavorable to darker-skinned athletes, that the angles and intensity reduced visible definition on black competitors, while enhancing it on others. Whether those conditions were the result of deliberate decisions was never conclusively established, but the broader pattern was difficult to dismiss. A competitor who kept winning his division kept leaving without the overall title. There was also the matter of contracts. No black bodybuilder had ever been signed by the WIDA organization, the most powerful entity in professional bodybuilding at the time. Robinson said that publicly and on the record. In later years, he moderated his position somewhat on Joe WIDA personally, allowing that the timing may not have been right, and that it may not have been a personal decision. But in the early 1980s, he made statements that put him in direct conflict with the sport's governing body. He pointed out that the IFBB was not paying its athletes fairly, that competitors doing the work were not seeing real financial return, and that athletes had to advocate for themselves because no one else would. The IFBB responded quickly. They suspended him. Robby Robinson's relationship with the IFBB had been deteriorating for years. He had spoken openly about racism in judging, about the absence of contracts for black athletes, and about the Federation's power structure in ways that few others were willing to at the time. Eventually, the Federation responded with a double lifetime ban. Not a single lifetime ban, but two, effectively closing the door on his career in American professional bodybuilding. Robinson left the country. He relocated to Amsterdam and spent 13 years competing across Europe. By his own account, the experience was markedly different. He was evaluated on his physique, not his race, and he described being treated as an athlete rather than a liability. He became a dominant presence in European bodybuilding throughout the 1980s and into the early 1990s, continuing to accumulate titles during that period. In the United States, the sport moved forward without him. Then in 1994, a new competition was announced, the Masters Mr. Olympia, a contest open to bodybuilders over the age of 40. A rumor that circulated in bodybuilding circles for years held that the event had been created, at least in part, to provide Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk, a well-known fan favorite, with an Olympia platform where he wouldn't be competing against the top professionals in their prime. If that was the intent, it proved to be a significant miscalculation. Robby Robinson arrived at the inaugural Masters Mr. Olympia in 1994 at 48 years old, and by most accounts he was in the best shape of his career. After years competing in Europe following bans, racism accusations, a near-death experience, and a sickle cell crisis, he stepped onto that stage and outperformed everyone else in the lineup, including Lou Ferrigno. The crowd had come to cheer for Ferrigno, but the judges scored what was in front of them. Robinson won. He took the title on the strength of a physique that was difficult to argue with, not through politics or personal connections. He returned in 1997 and won again, then won a third time in 2000. 3 Masters Olympia titles across 6 years at an age when most professional athletes have already been retired for more than a decade. His final competitive appearance came at the 2001 Masters Olympia, where he placed 4th at 55 years old, a finish that, given the demands of the sport and his age, carried its own significance. Robinson officially retired from competition that year, closing out a 27-year professional career. For most athletes, that would mark the transition into a quieter life away from public attention, and that is what many expected for Robinson as well. It was not what happened. Robby Robinson is in his late 70s. He still carries 20-inch arms and a 29-inch waist, the same measurements he had when he arrived at Venice Beach in 1975. He discusses this openly, without embellishment. He trains every day, not light exercise, but structured bodybuilding work. Free weights, compound movements, drop sets, and volume training taken to failure. After more than 5 decades, his approach remains that of someone focused on progress. He has been seen at Gold's Gym in Venice performing preacher curls with 70-pound barbells. He trains alongside figures like Mike O'Hearn, and during those sessions he hits poses that draw a visible reaction from others in the room. In 2023, Robinson traveled to Naples, Italy for a guest posing appearance at G-exclusive gym. The crowd that gathered had modest expectations. What followed was a display of precision and muscular detail that those present described as one of the most memorable bodybuilding moments they had witnessed, not for sentimental reasons, but because the physique itself was genuinely exceptional by any standard. His nutritional approach is strict and consistent. He favors whole, natural foods and avoids processed products. He recommends sourcing meat from family-owned butchers rather than supermarkets, citing concerns about hormones and additives in commercially produced meat. His diet centers on lean proteins and vegetables, with caloric intake adjusted depending on whether he is in a building or leaning phase. He applies this discipline at nearly 80 years old, with the same rigor most athletes struggle to maintain at half his age. He has also spoken extensively about supplementation, describing it not as optional but as essential for aging athletes. His position is that the body's recovery capacity declines significantly with age, and that a targeted supplement regimen compensates for that decline. He has maintained a consistent stack for many years, adjusting it based on his body's response rather than current market trends. In 2016, at the age of 70, Robby Robinson married Rossella Radoglia. That same year, he was still making guest posing appearances, still in remarkable shape, still connected to the sport he had devoted his life to. The marriage reflected the broader pattern of his post-retirement years, not a withdrawal but a continuation. He and Rossella have remained together since, and by multiple accounts she has been a source of stability and support. His work as a trainer and coach has expanded considerably in the years since he stopped competing. He works by appointment, drawing on methods developed alongside the legends of the Golden Era. He has been inducted into the Gold's Gym Bodybuilding Wall of Fame, a recognition that places him among the sport's all-time figures. That the recognition came as late as it did is part of a broader conversation about how consistently his career was undervalued while it was unfolding. In 2013, he published his autobiography, The Black Prince: My Life in Bodybuilding, which offered the first comprehensive account of his experiences. The poverty, the racism, the sickle cell crises, the conflicts with the IFBB, the European years, the comeback. Every element of it is documented and verifiable. Then in 2024, Generation Iron released a documentary titled Robby Robinson's Blueprint, described as a full account of who he was at his peak and what he has built since. The bodybuilding community received it with considerable enthusiasm. His website, robbyrobinson.net, was hacked and required a full rebuild, which prompted a public advisory stating that Robinson would never contact fans through third-party managers or management entities, as those contacts were, in his words, most likely scammers. At nearly 80 with a Hall of Fame career behind him, he remains a target for people looking to exploit his name and reputation. Robby Robinson's life contains a set of facts that, placed side by side, form an unusual picture. He was born the youngest of 14 children to an abandoned family in the Deep South. He carried a genetic blood condition that nearly killed him at the height of his career. He was repeatedly passed over for bodybuilding's highest title, despite being among its most competitive athletes. He was pushed out by the sport's most powerful federation. For more than a decade, he competed abroad simply to be judged on equal terms. Today, at 79, he still poses on stage to standing ovations. He trains daily with the same intensity he brought to competition decades ago. He coaches younger athletes, maintains the same measurements he had 50 years ago, and continues to build his brand and respond to his audience. When asked why he has maintained this level of conditioning and commitment, Robinson's answer is straightforward. We're always working all the time. I love what I do. 8 words, no elaboration. They describe plainly how a man born into poverty, denied recognition by his own sport, and nearly felled by illness managed to outlast and outperform most of those who stood against him. The question that persists in bodybuilding circles is why Robinson's name is so often absent from conversations about the definitive figures of the Golden Era, why he is left off lists, where by competitive record he belongs near the top. The pattern suggests that the same institutional forces that denied him the Mr. Olympia overall title also shaped how the sport's history has been recorded. Organizational power has long influenced what gets emphasized and what gets minimized. What Robinson has is something those institutions cannot reach. Each time he walks onto a stage in his late 70s, with 20-inch arms and a waist smaller than most men half his age, he makes a case that no federation can prohibit. What he built was real, it was his, and neither the IFBB, nor the wider organization, nor the passage of time has been able to diminish it. At over 70, Robinson continues to compete, coach, and train at a level that reflects not longevity alone, but decades of consistent, uninterrupted work, sustained through a career that the sport's governing bodies repeatedly tried to cut short.